A man from the East Coast, making his way all the way to the Midwest. Trying to make a better life, trying to provide, and trying to survive. It's the Midwest Boatonian. And now, here's Boston Johnny.
You're tuned back into the Midwest Boatonian. Today we continue our interview series with Sergeant Holmes from the U.S. Air Force. Today we talk about the decision, making a decision to choose which force is right for you, parental support, and also how you can gain support as yourself in becoming a future airman.
So my second question is we went through this as a family, and I just thought that it would be very helpful for other parents that might be in a similar situation that we are. What is the right approach when my child first comes to me and is telling me that he has a passion to join the military? And it's a general question because I know my son, when we first started, it was just a general word military, and then how does it get funneled down to the force that they choose?
Very first off, me being a parent as well, and of course my son is not quite as old as your son, so he sees what dad does, and he's got a little patriotism in him as well. But the very first thing I would do as a parent, and of course this is just me talking, but is pat him on the back and congratulate him. I mean, for wanting to step up and do something right and serve their country, I think that's amazing. Second thing is being very supportive. I think parents play a big role in this decision and any decision that their child makes, whether it be college or joining the service or going straight into a trade. So being very supportive is probably one of the biggest things. And next, meeting up with the recruiters to determine what is your child's goals, what's their dreams, what do they want to do in life, and being able to see if the Air Force can help them with that. Always as many questions as possible. You always want to go into a recruiter's office prepared, asking as many questions as you can. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's what a recruiter is there for, is to make sure that young man or woman has as much information, as much knowledge as they have to make a sound decision about their career.
That's a good point. It brings up a question I didn't have planned. It is when we decide, we're very helpful with our child because we believed in what he believed in as well. I know some parents are undecisive about it, and if I wasn't so sure on the decision, I know when I approached school about it, it kind of didn't go the way I thought it would go. In fact, it didn't. It just seemed like in a way there was a slight deterrence. Is that just my situation, or do you see that, or is there some way to approach the school to get a different type of answer?
Well, us as recruiters, that's kind of our job too. We do a million things in one. It seems like we're jack of all trades, but we do try to get into the schools as often as possible. There are certain schools that we go once a month, some once every couple months, and some every quarter. But what our opportunity to be able to present to the influencers in that school, such as the guidance counselors, the principals, the teachers, we give them every opportunity to know them and to tell them about the different opportunities that those young men and women can have while serving in the Air Force, so that it's not just about that old myth of just joining the service or going to war or different things like that. It's about the opportunities to tell them that they have a career, and to let them know about the community college of the Air Force and how it can benefit not only the school, the parents, but ultimately the number one goal is to benefit the student themselves.
And that was one of the things that really shocked me is I didn't have a lot of clues about the military, and that's why I was lucky that my son was gung-ho about it enough to where he did a lot of the research. But I wasn't aware, and maybe some of the parents out there isn't aware, that the Air Force kind of handles it, at least from my perspective, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a little differently, where my son, once he joins, he starts getting college credits, and he starts getting to a point where he can get close to getting a career goal just by serving. And I don't think the other forces do that, or I could be incorrect.
Correct. So from the time that your son comes into basic military training in Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, they're automatically enrolled into what's called the Community College of the Air Force. Community College of the Air Force is the largest community college in the world, and it is the only the Air Force is the only branch in the Department of Defense that has their own community college. The good thing about the community college is it's regionally accredited, so all the credits that they earn while they're in basic training, while they're in their technical training, is all transferable. So like you had mentioned, your son is earning a college degree. Now what I've noticed as a recruiter is some young men and women that are in high school, college is the least of their concerns. However, us as parents, we want to make sure that our sons and daughters are educated as much as possible because of the way that the market and the economies go and the ability to get better jobs, hired on. So the Air Force is kind of it's pretty neat because they do both at once. The young men and women get to serve their country, that patriotism, travel the world, see Japan and Germany and California and all those.
And that college credit doesn't only tie to merely while they're in the forces. Once they're done, I think one of the things that you were telling me is, basically you get a free ride to do further education once you're done serving. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So while they're in the Air Force, not only do all their training college accredited, but also while they're in the Air Force will pay for their tuition, usually up to about $4,500 a year. So roughly about 6 classes per year, which is probably what they can handle with a full-time job.
Yeah.
I know I was able to do it, my last duty location, I took online classes. So roughly, let the Air Force pay for it.
Yeah.
Now, if that airman decides to separate from the service after 4 or 6 years, then what they can do is they'll have what's called post 9/11 GI Bill benefits. So, and of course that's through all branches, but the post 9/11 GI Bill is roughly about $150,000 to $160,000 in benefits, give or take. But ultimately, if you were to have no education whatsoever, it would cover a bachelor's degree.
Oh.
So if you take all the education that they've already earned while they're in the Air Force, they can just keep tacking on. So they can go on for their master's or their doctorate
MBA.
or whatever the case may be, and they never have to pay a dime for any of it.
That's a really great benefit. I probably undermined this question because of the previous ones I thought up along the way, but I always get excited when I talk to you. Other than the things you've already mentioned, or you can just glance over them, why do you think the Air Force is the best choice of all the branches in your opinion? I mean, we already saw what it's done for your career, but to tell a young son or daughter when they come in, what's kind of the reasons that you would help guide them into the Air Force?
Well, of course, I'm going to be a little biased with me being in the Air Force for 15 years. But like I mentioned earlier, probably the community college of the Air Force is the one thing that sets us apart between other branches. I believe our technology alone. We are the youngest branch out there, 70 years old this year. But I believe I just believe that, and again, me being biased, I believe we're more technologically advanced. I think we have some pretty cool jobs. To say that we kind of cover the airspace and cyberspace is pretty neat. I mean, to be able to be 18 years old and be in charge of a multi-million-dollar asset such as a fighter jet or maybe a satellite that's launched into space is pretty amazing compared to what other 18-year-olds might be in charge of doing.
That's true. One of the things that's always confused me that I just thought up about is my son's very interested in one of the tests that maps, I forget which one you said, but it's where the dots kind of stick out at you. And there was something about the...
like the color vision test?
Yeah, and because one of my son's dreams is to fly, but I always hear it still confuses me, and while I have you here, it would really help me, and it could help some other parents of a lot of people that want to fly. Some people will tell you, well, if you want to fly, go into the Navy. If you want to keep the planes in the air, you go into the Air Force. What is the real cut in that of if you want to be a pilot? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and again, I'm always gonna be biased on the Air Force. The Navy, nothing to take away from the Navy. They do have a great aviation program. They always have. But with the Air Force, that's how we get our name. We are the Air Force.
Because I think of planes.
Not only do we have fighters, we have multiple different types of fighters, whether it be F-15s, F-16s, the new F-35s, the F-22s, A-10s. Then we also have all your heavy planes, your C-17s, your C-5s, your C-130 gunships, all the helicopters that we have. So we not only manage kind of not just specific, I believe the Navy has F-18s, but how many different types of birds did I just listen? So that gives you the opportunity to kind of work on different airframes, different engines for those airframes, you know, whether it be Boeing or what have you. So I'm always going to say that we dominate the air power. Obviously, that's our name. But I would never say that, you know, we take over the water like the Navy does.
Yeah, I mean, those destroyers are pretty darn cool. And I think that's why us parents think that way. Is you see the destroyers taking off in I call them rubber bands, but I'd probably get laughed at. But the way they can take off and land on that thing in such a short distance has always amazed me.
Yeah, that is pretty neat.
So, I mean, God bless them as well. So talking about where we're kind of at is, you know, we've been working together a lot. One thing I'll say that surprised me is how hard you work with us as the parents and how we get along. And I don't know if every relationship with the parents is like that. And maybe we're too involved or like, I guess before I ask the question, I mean, we seem very involved and we're there for the steps and we want the pictures with our child and we want to be there for every piece of it. But there's some parents that probably don't want to go to the level that probably we do. And what is the parent involvement, and how do you handle if some parents may not have the time to help their child get in and they want their child to seem more independent and do it on their own? Maybe we're the rare parent that handholds our child too much. What would you recommend of kind of what you see, and do you handle all those different situations, or do you want parents to be a certain way with advice to the parents?
Well, I've probably handled all kinds of parents, all different ones, all different kinds. But like we had talked about earlier, I think it goes back to being us, because when you're 17 and 18 years old, sometimes your mind can change month to month. I know I did when I was 18, and it was important to be able to go to somebody that I lived with every night to be able to ask their advice on something, whether it be mom or dad or whoever, kind of point me in the right way, because sometimes they feel like I've never really had the personal problem, but I know some people don't feel like they can go and talk to the recruiter about maybe life-changing things or something like that. But I know that I can usually build a pretty good relationship with them that they can come talk to me.
Yeah. I don't want this podcast to be too biased, and because I'm a parent, I realize as is going forward that I tend to focus on the parents too much, but there might be future airmen listening that don't have a really good family situation. Is there any advice or stories you could tell about those people that might be listening that don't have any parent involvement? Because, unfortunately in this day and age, there are some people, men and women, that could be listening that just don't have what our son has.
Yeah, and probably the individuals like that maybe don't have parent involvement as much. My advice to them would find some sort of mentor. Maybe it's not your parents, but it could be a guidance counselor or your coach for rugby or football or whatever the case may be, or a close friend. But find some sort of mentor. Your recruiter is, like I said, they're there to guide you, and they probably will be your first Air Force mentor. Yep. And most recruiters are really good at what they do, and to help you get set up for different things. But if all else fails and you can't get that support of a parent, and you're 18 years old, find a mentor that you can rely on to talk to about what you want to do. There's somebody who's got your back, if you will.
We'd hate to say goodbye, but it looks like our program has come to an end. Tune in next time for the Midwest Boatonian. Until then, keep calm and bossed on.